What's up, Coordination? How you doing? Today on the pod, we got Raphaël from Toucan. Toucan launched in October of 2021 to be an infrastructure provider behind the base carbon ton, which is the carbon reference token, and released with their launch partner KlimaDAO, which is a platform built on Toucan's technology that helps remove carbon from the atmosphere. So basically, the BCT achieved $2 billion in trading volume in 2021, which I just think is incredible. I mean, yeah, it was a bull run, but $2 billion, and they had just launched. And basically, they have really been thinking deeply about the intersection of Web3 and carbon neutrality. And I just think that, coordination, I call you Coordination because it's a nation of coordinators. We are here to coordinate and to solve multipolar traps and game theoretic problems. And climate change is like the biggest one. It's not the only one, but it's the biggest one. And so I think that what Toucan is doing is like the intersection of Web3 and climate action, and that's regenerative crypto. That's coordination. And if Web3 is going to allow us to program our values into our money, and we value having a climate that's not burning and oceans that aren't boiling, then I think this is an important piece of the global financial open source infrastructure that is building. So is Toucan the solution for that? It sounds like they're one of the money Legos or refi Legos that is working on that. And I think that this episode kind of dives into that. Good sister episode to the KlimaDAO episode that we did a couple weeks ago. And I think that you're really going to enjoy this episode. So without further ado, I give you Raphaël from Toucan. Enjoy.
Immutable X is the layer 2 platform for crypto gaming. Immutable offers massive scalability with up to 9,000 transactions per second and instant transaction confirmation. No more gas fees, no more waiting around for your transaction to clear. Immutable's zero knowledge rollup finally unlocks the world of crypto gaming. Immutable X is the only gas-free NFT minting platform with over 26 million NFTs minted, all with zero gas fees. With the power of Immutable, gaming developers don't also need to become smart contract developers. They just need to plug in to Immutable's API and instantly start unlocking the full potential of crypto assets inside of games. This is why world-class companies and projects have decided to deploy on Immutable X, like GameStop, Ember Sword, Planet Quest, Illuvium, TikTok, and many more behind the scenes. So start building your game on Immutable X today at immutable.com. COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses who need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage their treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the extremely secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasuries to expressive, flexible, multi-chain features such as global user management, global contracts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization. COINSHIFT layers on powerful treasury management tools on top of the proven security of Gnosis Safe, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Messari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. In DeFi, you have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless.
All right. Hey, Raphaël, how you doing?
Hi, Kevin.
So excited to talk to you. Yeah, so glad to have you. I just really think that within the refi space, working on the climate and existential risk is one of the highest use of Web3 and DAOs, and that's why I'm so excited to have you to talk about Toucan Protocol. So can you tell me about Toucan?
Sure. So Toucan really is about being an infrastructure layer to make refi possible, right? So I think we played a crucial role in like making refi actually a thing. And essentially we started by bringing carbon credits on chain, having carbon as a building block to unlock all the innovation that can happen on top of it. So really we are kind of an infrastructure layer focused to unlock, builders and like help builders build better things and greater things on top of Web3 that will address the climate crisis.
Amazing. So, what would you say that, like, if Toucan is maximally successful, say in like 10 or 20 years, what does that look like? Like X number of carbon taken out of the atmosphere. Like, what's the positive externality if you had to quantify it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it would have to do with having changed the financial system and really that DeFi and refi would not be 2 different places, but would be the same place, right? And I think this is what I'm really excited about, is that in Web3, we have the possibility to embed regenerative practices into the code and into the protocols that the world will be built on. So For me, like Toucan will be successful if in every Uniswap transaction or every if any transaction on chain, some portion, some value would flow back toward regenerative practices. So that's one thing, and that would obviously ultimately translate into financing the best carbon removal projects and removing carbon from the atmosphere, and hopefully be back within levels of greenhouse gases that are creating a sustainable environment for our society to live in, right? Because ultimately, right now, we're like far beyond the planetary boundaries, and it's really about like bringing our economic system back into those planetary boundaries. So, yeah, that's
I want to get back into the practical, but let's go deep on some of that a little bit first. So planetary boundaries. I was just recording a podcast the other day with someone who said that we have a linear materials economy that's based off of materials on the Earth, and then we have this like need for exponential growth in our economies. And so basically, these two things are constrained with each other. There's a planetary boundary of how much energy that we have, how much carbon can we externalize, and biodiversity and lots of other things. And how do you sort of think about planetary boundaries when it comes to this space and the impact that Toucan can have?
Yeah, so obviously it's a lot about energy, right? There's a good view in like society being a heat machine. Really, what we do is we take low entropic energy, right, in form of like oil and gas, etc., like energy that has been condensed into like very small, taking up very small space, and we combust that energy. It dissipates heat, and it creates like highly entropic waste, essentially, which is like greenhouse gases, etc. So so on that front, right, on like the greenhouse gas level, obviously we've gone beyond the planetary boundaries, and it's like what is planetary boundaries here, right? It's not that the Earth really cares. It's that the organisms and the species living on Earth that really care, right? That like we need to stay within that zone. Like we're in a very, very kind of unique position in kind of the broad history of time, where the temperatures are like not moving too much, and this is essentially like the ground for the world, like for the life forms that currently live on the Earth to survive. So, and right now we're shooting out of that band, right? We're shooting beyond that, and and as you said, the challenge is that right now our kind of economic system is based on extraction. So we will extract like a lot of that. And this is why it's tied to money as well. Like a lot of like practices that generate money are based on extraction, and so we don't have that kind of path that flows back into putting that greenhouse gas back into like fixed forms, into like reinvesting into capturing that carbon. So we're basically just creating more and more heat, and we're not not creating a sustainable system, and especially not regenerative.
Nice. And do you see like basically all these like money Legos in the refi space around carbon capture, and then hopefully transferring money into that, kind of correcting for that externality? Like how do you envision sort of the blockchain ecosystem helping to attempt to address this problem and maybe even solve it if we're lucky?
Yeah, I mean, it's a coordination failure at its heart, right? And so Web3,
that's my keyword. The coordination failures is what we're trying to solve in here.
Yeah. I mean, this is so true for climate, right? Like it's just a big, it's just a big mess, and it's going to take a lot of people and a lot of capital and coordinate that to kind of fix it, right? So coordination is the name of the game. It's ultimately about moving like substantial amount of resources, especially financial resources, from the global north to the global south. That's a pain today in like the existing financial system. Like it's really hard. And if you then also want to like make sure that money flows towards projects that are most impactful, there's a component here about like measuring impact, getting that data, making sure that donation or that like money that is flowing there is used in its most efficient way. So what we believe with Toucan is that the systems that will kind of unfuck the planet and allow that coordination to play out and for the best, they need to be running on open systems. That's like open source, open data, open access. And so this is why we believe that by building this like ground layer, like carbon credits really are just vehicles to like move money from A to B, right? It's a results-based finance mechanism where there's a climate project on one side that is like planting trees, like, to simplify things. Some third parties like verifying that those trees are actually there and have captured that carbon. So it's like an ex post verification. And then the carbon credit really is just like a packaged positive externality that can be moved around. And right. And like one of the things, like the most prominent use case for these packaged positive externalities today is to use them to match them with your negative externalities and call yourself carbon neutral, or like call your company carbon neutral or whatever, which is a pretty boring use case, in my opinion, for something good. And so what I believe with that, with Web3, we have also other use cases for like, how do we make money flow to positive things? I mean, and Gitcoin ultimately is the best example of that, right? Like, just you guys just prove like that this is possible. So, I mean, it's incredible. Like the Gitcoin, like the last round, like the top 3 projects were climate projects. That's insane. Yeah, sorry, I got lost here, but like I hope I answered the question in that download.
Yeah, no, it's just neat. I mean, like in DeFi, they have money Legos, and the nice thing is that when you're launching an ERC20 token, you can take the Open Zeppelin repo, and then you can launch governance on top of Compound. Like that's what Gitcoin did when we launched DAO. And it's really nice to have that forkable and composability because everything can be interoperable from there, and it just speeds up innovation because you have all these different money Legos that you can combine. And the reason why I'm saying this is like that composability I could see being really useful in the refi space, as basically you have different people that are providing different I don't want to say money Legos, like refi Legos. And it seems like Toucan is aiming to have like a core one of those.
Yeah, 100%. And ultimately Toucan is a bet on the Web3 community, right? Like we are running out of time on solving the climate crisis. So we cannot build barriers around innovation on the climate side, right? And that's what the status quo looks like. The current carbon markets are like basically behind moats. It's hard to access. It's hard to get a Vera account. It's hard to like play in that market, and especially hard to innovate in that market. So the objective is just like to break that open, create like, as you said, a kind of carbon Lego that like people can build on top on, and then innovation can happen. And then who knows? Maybe the project that is going to kind of solve climate change is going to be built on top of Toucan, right? And I think really like we don't have all the answers, so we need to get the community to like build and like try out, and like the iteration cycles are just so small in Web3 that's that gives me hope really at the end of the day.
Great. Anything more to say about the sort of like systemic climate crisis and like the game theory, or just like any like abstract thoughts before I take us back down into the real object level, tangible nuts and bolts of Toucan?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's just really important is like the climate crisis is like one crisis, but we also have a biodiversity crisis and the water crisis and other things, right? So we're fighting that carbon war, but like we need to make sure that it's kind of happening within a broader, like, that it makes sense based on this like broader landscape of crises that we are in. But the good thing is that if we do it right, climate finance also impacts, hopefully impacts like biodiversity and like water retention, local communities, etc. But we need to do it right. So that's just like one thing that I think is really important. The other one is that offsetting is not the only solution, right? Ultimately, it's about reducing emissions and not just compensating those emissions. So and going beyond that, like carbon neutrality, because the challenge that we have if everyone is carbon neutral, we haven't moved the needle a bit, right? We're just basically saying, okay, we're stopping at that point, and we already have like greenhouse gas levels that are beyond what's good for the world. So those are some thoughts that I have. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure if you have read like Ministry for the Future and like the whole.
I haven't, but it's been recommended to me a couple times, so I may have to add it to the list.
Yeah, you should. I mean, it's based on an idea from Delton Chang on like green quantitative easing, and like that's one of the things that got me really excited. And it's the idea, how do we back money with carbon and like stuff that we actually care about as a society. And I do believe that like if there is a place where we can try that out, right? If there's a place where we can start experimenting with like money and how money relates to value and to the environment, etc., it is Web3, right? And we've seen some of those experiments already in Web3, and there's like more and more projects that are kind of incorporating carbon as a building block or as a collateral asset in their protocols. And that's really interesting because we're essentially creating these like economic carbon sinks where if you use carbon as a collateral in MakerDAO, for instance, that those carbon credits are kind of locked in there, and it creates like a kind of pull. That's I think that's really that's really interesting, because we could actually, if we do it right, trigger some kind of carbon gold rush and kind of flip the thing on its head and like get people to like do carbon projects, because if you do carbon projects, you can actually mint money from it. So it's a bit out there, but I do think ultimately we are at a point where we need these crazy ideas, and like hopefully one of those crazy ideas is going to work.
Right. Yeah, it's a nice thing when you take the systemic view of the Ethereum ecosystem, is that it's kind of letting 1,000 experiments blossom. And then, we have these bear cycles where 50% of those projects will die, but then the ones that live will, inform the next epoch of everything. So it's all about that experimentation from my perspective. And this is one of the most important things the space could be working on, in my opinion.
100%. I'm really like, we started at a hackathon at East London actually in 2020. And that was just before the refi summer, the DeFi summer, and nobody cared about carbon. I can tell you, I was there at UCC trying to like convince people, hey, nobody cared. And now look where we are, right? 2 years later, and like refi is a thing, refi is on the map. Like I know like hundreds of builders that are kind of building towards that. So now it's the bear market, which is the perfect time to build anyway. So I'm really excited to see what's going to come up in like 1 year, 1.5 years, and like, all the teams that will have been built in silence and that will come out. So.
Right. Yeah. So y'all have been around, for a couple years now. And, take me through the launch. So I see in my notes here that y'all launched in October as the infrastructure behind the base carbon ton, and that y'all are partnered with KlimaDAO, who we just had on the podcast a few weeks ago, actually. So I would love to like learn more about the nuts and bolts of the system and that first experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, we started as a hackathon project when we were still called CEO Toucan back in February 2020. And then we did the blockchain for social impact incubator, kind of building on the idea to like bring carbon on chain and kind of use DAO to verify that the bridge of like bringing carbon on chain is actually valid. The ideas were there, but we were still pretty early. I ended up doing 9 months in a kind of a venture builder in London called Deep Science Ventures to really like flesh this idea out and really dive deep. That's where James, one of the other founders, joined me also in that research phase, and we basically spent 6 months together just mapping this whole space out, right? And it's funny because when I go back to these drawings and like these Figma boards, I remember that it felt so unreal 2 years ago, like when we were like sketching this out. We need decentralized carbon standard, digital MRV, and all of these things that then plug together into like an open data layer, right? It was all more like intellectual masturbation, I would say, or it felt at least like that at that point. But it was ultimately what, if I look at it now, all these things are kind of happening now, and it doesn't seem so crazy anymore. But coming out of that kind of venture builder part, we decided that the most impactful thing that we could do with Toucan is to build this like first carbon or like money Lego to use the existing carbon supply and bring it on chain so that we could have that we could experiment if the Web3 space is actually interested in tokenized carbon, and in that building block. And along the journey, RefiDAO appeared, and it makes sense as not RefiDAO, sorry, KlimaDAO appeared, and it made sense to use Toucan as the infrastructure behind KlimaDAO, and so KlimaDAO had this theory of change of like sweeping the floor of carbon, and so that's how the base carbon ton basically was created. So they one of their advisors and like their team came up with the requirements for the base carbon tons, basically which credits can go into, just to explain how these pools work, right? So how Toucan works is that we right now we connect to legacy carbon registries like Vera, and allow holders of these carbon credits to tokenize them, to bring them on chain, right? And so we don't actually own the carbon, we don't transact that. We're really just an infrastructure provider, and it's basically you hold your carbon credit as a certificate and you turn it into a token. And then that token on chain has all the metadata that is attached to that project, right? So it can be like a reforestation project from Brazil from 2020, etc. All these attributes are attached to it. And then ultimately what these pools allow you to do, the base carbon pool, for instance, it allows these different projects and these different credits to be put into a same basket, the same pool, to create a single kind of more commoditized version of that carbon. So the base carbon ton essentially is backed by, millions of different carbon credits from different projects that all satisfy those criteria that need to be true in order for you to be able to deposit any carbon ton into the base carbon pool. And so the base carbon pool was the first kind of collateral asset behind KlimaDAO, and was kind of optimizing for that kind of sweep the floor narrative. So today, I think there's like that narrative has shifted slightly on their side. I personally think that like the base carbon ton as an asset is fits very well to that narrative. I don't think it fits super well as being an offset, like an asset to offset your emissions, which is an unpopular opinion. I'll say that, but it's it makes sense. Like the sweep the floor narrative is basically like, let's take the oldest and like the lowest quality credits, put them into a pool, like get them off the market, and like lock them into the black hole of the Klima treasury. And now that narrative has shifted towards being being more of a marketplace, a liquidity aggregator, etc. I personally find it a bit problematic because the carbon credits are based in the base carbon pool are not of highest quality, and I think it still has a role to play as a tool to get that off the market. But to make environmental claims against that, I think is a bit more challenging or a bit more questionable.
I see. Got it. So it seems
one of the reasons. Sorry, like that's one of the reasons that we launched like the Nature Carbon Ton, which is like only nature-based carbon credits, and like has a bit more of a constrained acceptance criteria. So not all types of credits can be deposited into the Nature Carbon Pool to mint entity.
Right. Got it. And it looks like from my notes, I'm not sure if I wrote this down right, but $2 billion in trading volume during the entire year of 2021. It seems like a lot for a first year launch.
Yeah, I mean, the hype was real, right? Like, the hype was real. Olympus DAO was going great until it wasn't, and KlimaDAO was the biggest project, the biggest contender to being the next Olympus DAO. So there was a lot of hype around this, and BCD being the main asset backing KlimaDAO obviously saw a lot of that trading volume. Definitely beyond anything that we would have imagined, or like it is. It's been a explosive launch in that regard.
Got it. So you mentioned Olympus DAO, and I know that I think that Olympus DAO, KlimaDAO is a fork of Olympus DAO, and they use some of the same tech. But were they one of the biggest sort of consumers of the tech? Like, what DAOs have you seen kind of adopt? Like, where'd that volume come from? I guess is what I'm asking.
All that volume came from Klima. Like Klima was the first, like the first use case built on Toucan. So all that volume, I wouldn't credit that volume to Toucan. That would be that would not be correct. Like that volume was generated because of KlimaDAO, and so and ultimately BCT is an asset that's been it's built on Toucan tech, but it's built it's very much a KlimaDAO asset in that regard.
Right. I see. Okay. Cool. Well, where are y'all going from here? What's next?
Yeah. So I mean, the bear market is the best time to build, right? So I think there's still a lot of education to be done. To get these two niche worlds together, as I'm sure you're very aware of, like the Web3 world and the kind of carbon world are both quite niche, and like the overlap is still relatively small. So there's a lot of education to be done on like the traditional carbon market side, because ultimately we're not building Toucan to just like give some like Web3 people just stay in that bubble and like get build this building. That's like we believe that this is going to like swap over into the traditional carbon market, and we really believe that climate is one of the killer applications for blockchains, because we're dealing with intangible assets. We're dealing with like what is a carbon credit? It's like it's a bit of data, it's some signatures and a PDF. Like so that's why there's been so much fraud and like along that value chain. So our objective really is to legitimize on-chain carbon within the traditional carbon market space. So that's one big goal. Another one is to get to diversify the supply that we have in Toucan. So to move beyond just like Vera credits and like onboard different sorts of carbon removal and like more maybe also like more niche types of carbon assets. And then ultimately it's just driving the integrations in Web3, right? Like there's still refi is still a relatively small bubble, and so just building the general consciousness of like, hey, we as a Web3 society, as a we have a role to play in addressing the climate crisis, and we actually have the tools that we need to address the climate crisis, and we just need to use them, and we need to build communities around them that can bring those tools and like drive that money to the projects. And I think if you look at Gitcoin, who would have thought that this is I mean, maybe you probably saw it, but like I have to say I didn't see it when I first saw Gitcoin. I was like, wow, that's cool, but like I didn't get it from the get-go how powerful this is, right? So
the Opera crypto browser is the world's first web browser built for the crypto community. With Web3 support and a non-custodial wallet, Opera lets you access DeFi apps quickly and easily. The Opera wallet has buy, sell, and swap features, and of course lets you view your beautiful NFTs, but the browser still lets you use any crypto wallet extension you prefer, giving you the choice and flexibility for the Web3 world. Opera lets you view and manage all of your assets across all the blockchains all at once, and offers seamless multi-chain support between Ethereum, Bitcoin, Polygon, Binance Chain, and other EVMs and layer 2s. But Opera goes even deeper than that. Opera has a built-in homepage for crypto natives with the Opera Crypto Corner, with price charts, news feeds, NFT updates to make sure you are always on top of your game. And it even has Discord and Telegram integrated natively into the browser. That's crazy. Opera is truly building the battle station for the crypto world. Check out Opera both on mobile with Android and iOS apps, and on desktop too. Refi summer has arrived, and CELO is here for it. CELO is the layer 1 blockchain for the regenerative finance movement. It's fast, planet positive, and built for the real world. CELO has committed towards producing a sustainable future from the very beginning, and is the world's first carbon negative, EVM compatible layer 1 blockchain. CELO has become much more than a technology, a currency, a community, or even just a layer 1. CELO is a movement to create conditions of prosperity for everyone. You can soon engage with all of this via green asset Uniswap pools on CELO, benefiting reforestation and other regenerative products through the Toucan Protocol, Moss, and more. Refi is also about the health of communities, and Resource Network is creating Bankless infrastructure for circular trade and mutual credit networks to benefit small businesses and local economies, all on CELO. Follow along on Twitter to learn more about how CELO is accelerating Refi summer for a positive impact on people, communities, and the planet. If you're attending ECC, visit the CELO Saloon to learn about what's happening on the front lines of Refi from industry experts.
Yeah, I mean, I think the refi space is so the refi space is so small and so niche, but I think that this is honestly one of the highest use is of the blockchain space. And one of the things I've been trying to figure out is just how to have more Web3 people understand the refi space and take it seriously. I think a lot of people think that this is going to be just like charity 2.0, but because the NGO sector is so stagnant and blockchain has so much to offer, I think to capital that's trying to have an impact on the world, I just trying to figure out how to build it to be a bigger thing within the space, but also how do we legitimize refi Web3 to the carbon markets and to people who care about energy, because the reputation is really quite bad now.
It is. Yeah, that's like, and that's really sad to be honest, that like crypto still has this like scam appeal to a lot of people. And it's like with Toucan, we spend so much time just explaining how how Terra has not much to do with us, or like Terra, or like, anyways, like it's still very much a bridge building exercise, right? I always joke that like, we thought that building the carbon bridge in Toucan was the hardest part, but ultimately building the bridge between those two communities is significantly harder. So but yeah, that's true on both sides, right? That's true on both the kind of carbon market world, which is kind of looking at that Web3 space with doubts and fears, and then there's like the traditional Web3 space that I have to say sometimes is like, some people really are like very, very close-minded in like, I find like that I only learned that like now by kind of going beyond my small bubbles in Web3, that I realized that, oh wow, like for a lot of people still, I thought refi was bigger than it really is, right? I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is like for so many it's still just a money making. Yeah, it's like it's all about kind of building financial tools to like make profit or whatever. And I think that we're just replicating what we see in the Web3 the Web2 space, and we're just like putting it on the blockchain, like then it just becomes capital. Yeah, it becomes capitalism on steroids, right? And like we're basically back to like an unregulated Wild West. I'm not like, I find that, I don't know, what's your position on regulation in the space? Like I find it really hard to have a good opinion about this.
Just about where it's going and the need of
is it bad? Is it good? Like where, like, do we want more regulation?
Sorry, is what bad or what good?
Regulation. Do you think that we should have more regulation in Web3?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really like I think that like on the object level, Terra's collapse is bad. The amount of carbon that's being used is bad, and I think that we want to prevent people from losing all their money on UST. With something that was advertised as a stable coin, because it hurts the space a lot. And I think that like on the carbon front, the fact that the merge is happening and we're gonna be carbon neutral is going to be a real opportunity to go on narrative offense. Although there's people that have already decided that they hate Web3 and are going to rally against it. And I think it's just going to have to be a generational thing where when it's here to stay, people get normalized to it and they don't hate it as much. And like the analogy I make is like the internet was all about sending information across a computer network, and you could build a website for anything back then. Like the internet was for porn. Was like a Broadway play that was like out there back then. But like the internet is for porn, but it's for lots of other great things. You use news, entertainment, like education. And there's the same thing with like finances. Like the internet of money can be used for like Ponzi schemes, but it can also be used to solve the deepest systemic coordination failures out there. And the real question is, how do we create an informed base of people who can tell the difference between column A and column B? And I don't know the exact way to do it, but I do think first do no harm, then go on offense and be a positive externality for the world. And I think that we're kind of like turning that shift in this market cycle into projects that just like capital rotating into just the projects that have the best Ponzi-nomics, and away from that into the projects that have the best real world impact. And that's what I would like to see. Now, how do we manifest that I think the big question. And, there's a couple questions embedded in that. One is like, how do we get capital allocators to even like to put money into Toucan or projects like it? And the second one is like, how do we separate the projects that are actually meaningful, like yours, from the scams? And I think regulation is one way that it could be done, but I'm skeptical that it's going to work in a global open source financial system, that a nation state regulation approach is going to piecemeal work. So that's my answer to your question.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good answer. I appreciate it. I think it's a complex problem, and I share the same, like, regulation, like from where, right? Because you asked me earlier, like, this is one of the key challenges with the climate crisis, is that like nobody is responsible for it. Mm-hmm. Everyone is responsible for it. Some are more responsible for it, but like ultimately, we don't have that like global body that can say, hey, United States, please don't like stop emitting.
Well, there's no global body with legitimacy, right? Because we've got the UN, but that's comprised a lot by like richer nations who have already extracted a lot of hydrocarbons out of the earth. And so they don't have the legitimacy to tell the up and coming developing nations. And so we're in this multipolar trap where we need like a neutral coordination, bottom up infrastructure. I think that's like highly legitimate and also high resolution, because we have the UN, but it's such like low resolution, like handshake politics, that we need something that is more like information age.
Yeah, and I think it can only be at this point it can only be from the bottom up, because like I think we're kind of at an inflection point where like global politics is like it's just a farce. It's just a farce.
Networks over hierarchies are the most official way, and the best way to get things done in an information-rich world is with networks.
It's networks, exactly. So I know we're probably a bit off track now, but I agree. Like it's our task to make people to educate people and make people care, and kind of find these loopholes, and like how do we. And ultimately, as I said, like there's no easy answers here. Like because we're trying to have real world impact. Like we're trying to change the, ecology, the local ecology in like Colombia or whatever. Like we're trying to have real impact on the ground. So but that's also what's so fascinating about it, right? Like because it is about like sensors, about like getting that data, kind of making sense of the world, making sense of that data, connecting it to like the assets on chain, transacting these assets, and ultimately, like making, like embedding that, like, programmable carbon, embedding it into systems, right, into the metaverse. Let's plant trees in the metaverse and actually, sequester carbon in the real world. Or we had an interesting, token gated communities, or where you have some. Only if you are provenly kind of contributing towards addressing the climate crisis, you can be part of some community, or you can, you get rebates when you do shopping or whatever. Like, how do we incentivize the behavior ultimately that we want to see in the world? And I mean, like and that's where all these all these Ponzi-nomics, all these just pure financial applications, they're building tools that we can leverage to build these incentives as well, right? So ultimately, I'm very thankful for the groundwork that's been done, and that we have these open tools available, and we can just change a few parameters, and we have a kind of open carbon market, right? So
which is why I would push back a little bit on your supposition that we're off track, because I don't think there's a track. And it is, we are part of this broader ecosystem, right? It's a funnel. The total value in Web3 and the total brand awareness of Web3 are like the top of the funnel, and then like the regen Web3 and the awareness of that and the value in that is the next part of the funnel. And then coming off of that is this kind of like circular economy, but also these positive externalities for material and living capital that come out of that. So it's about widening 100%. The funnel into, I think that the work that you're doing. And I think that's super important. So Anything to say about that as a funnel?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about something. You said something about like the narrative offense on like, Ethereum moving to proof of stake and the merges that were happening. Like, how do we leverage that? Like, I remember talking to Liggy from the Ethereum Foundation like last summer, I think it was, or like even 2 years ago. I think it was, I don't know. It's where we were talking about like how do we offset the merge? Like, how do we offset the historical footprint of Ethereum on, like together with the merge? Because like, the merge is awesome. We're reducing the emissions by 99.9% or something. But like, how do we go into like the narrative offense? How do we use the collective kind of power of Web3 to kind of show that like this community cares, this community has like, has the values and the power to make a real difference in the world. So I don't know. I think like, when we had this discussion a while ago, the merge was still pretty far away. Now it's like round the corner. Quite unbelievable. Exactly.
I think that.
Go ahead.
I think you were just asking like, how do we go on narrative offense around carbon?
How do we leverage that? Like,
I mean, I think first do no harm, right? Have no negative externalities first. So like, by the way, the negative externalities of Web3 are not just like carbon, which like, by the way, the merge is going to be great for future emissions. If there was a DAO that developed to offset the historical emissions, more power to them. I think that'd be great. I think it'd be cheaper to do during a bull market than a bear market because there's more capital to go into carbon. The carbon negative externalities, but also the Ponzi negative externalities are bad also. Like if retail investors are getting fleeced into like the next Terra, that's pretty bad too. And 100%. So, like the people who have already decided that they hate Web3 will just shift narratives if Web3 only does the carbon offsetting and doesn't fix the Ponzi-nomic, like the capital rotation into Ponzi's. And so I think that those are the two major negative externalities that I'm aware of. And then I think from there, it's a matter of really highlighting the category of impact DAOs, and that category even exists, helping the talent and the capital find those impact DAOs is sort of the next thing. And then it's like a scale, like negative externalities go down and positive externalities go up. And I don't know shit about like marketing or messaging it or media campaigns, but I only even want to be involved in media campaigns if it's true. Like I'm not going to market that if it's not true. So I think it's first like actually making it true, and then the messaging will take care of itself in a networked world is sort of my maybe somewhat naive approach. But I think Toucan is going to be like a key part of this story if y'all keep growing and doing billions of dollars of trading volume and working on this.
Yeah, working on this. 100%. I think that is the mantra. That is the mantra for the next months now. Like, I don't know how you experiencing the bear market. Like, is it bad for you guys, or is it just, or do you appreciate the reduction of noise?
Yeah. What's funny now, I feel like you're interviewing me. But
sorry,
I don't know. Maybe it's just the way this has gotten conversational at the end. But I do think that like you've been around since the last bear, and bear market is the best time to build, like you said. I'd be curious, like what I didn't ask you that you want to tell me. Now that we've talked about like messaging, ecosystem, game theory, and economics of climate change, and then Toucan's nuts and bolts, like what didn't we cover, or how would you connect the dots further?
So I mean, I opened, I kind of touched on a few points. As I said, like our core belief is that like, by building these money Legos or these carbon Legos, we can unlock stuff. So I'd be like, Toucan is really at a point now where like, the SDK, like the contract, the smart contracts to kind of integrate carbon are like already, and it's like easy to build now. So like I welcome any like any experiment, any like also obviously big projects to like to think about how can a protocol integrate carbon as a building block into their protocol. So for instance, where like how can we redirect some of the yield that is generated in Web3 towards like permanently retiring carbon credits and like making value flow back. So I think this is a very interesting point. Then ultimately, we are on the path to go kind of multi-chain. We launched on Polygon. We're now we're building a bridge to CELO, and then building a bridge like obviously Ethereum and others, waiting for the merge to become a reality. And then so yeah, like any talent that is that wants to work on that niche of like Web3 climate, please hit us up. We're hiring and like looking for the like smartest and like most motivated people to work on like the hardest problems. So
Nice.
I think other than that, I mean, obviously I can dive into kind of the mechanics on how Toucan works, but I guess that like I don't know how much time we got left, but
yeah, we got about 5 minutes left. Can we maybe do like a high level overview in 5 minutes, or should we just direct people to something written?
I mean, we have a ton of ton of content on the blogs. So there's blogs at Toucan.earth, and and there's another one which is developer.toucan.earth. Let me just check that. Developer.toucan.earth. So that's a builder hub that is specifically targeting builders and has there's a grant program as well for builders, and there's example projects that are kind of building on Toucan and nice. Documentation and all of that. So I think this is a great resource if you want to build there. Another thing that's really cool is we've came out of kernel as well. And we're
Gitcoin, looks like you have a Gitcoin grant also, so I think that we've intersected in multiple ways already.
Oh yeah, absolutely. you guys have been awesome, man, really.
It's not us, it's the Ethereum community. We're just a channel through which they give you money, but yes,
that is true. That is true, but still I was about to say kernel, we're hosting the refi or the regeneration guild for the next round of kernel as well. There's been one already in the past, which was really cool. So if you want to get building in the space and you don't really know how to start and where to start, etc., I honestly cannot recommend kernel more. It's beautiful people, but it's also extremely informative and and hands-on. You actually do stuff. So that's amazing. Those are some of the key things that I have to say. And obviously, we're going to be in Barcelona right now. I don't know when this podcast is coming out, so probably that's not relevant. But if you're going to Paris, we're going to be there as well.
Nice. Yeah. So maybe I'll see you at ETHCC.
Yeah.
So it sounds like check y'all out. We'll have a link to the Toucan website on the show notes. And thanks so much for joining me on the GreenPilled podcast, Raph.
Thanks, Kevin. That was really fun.
Yeah, definitely.